Hello, everyone.
Hey there, folks.
This is Avery,
And this is Rita.
and you're listening to
I Don't Know Her,
the podcast where we talk about women and
Some other folks,
that you've probably never heard of.
but you should have.
Now you will.
Alrighty. We are recording on New Year's Eve,
We are. So we are on the cusp of a new year,
2023.
23. Isn't that wild?
It sounds weird.
I was at the gym the other day, and my personal trainer was like, I put on a playlist just for you. And I was like, really?
Oh.
He goes, yeah, it's the New Year's Eve 20 years ago playlist. And I was like, okay, because we're about the same age. I think he might be a year older than me. So like we went to college around the same time.
Okay,
whatever.
so this would have been your playlist when you were...
A freshman in college.
Okay. Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
And those songs started, and I was like, yeah. Yeah. Like, straight out of my club era. When I used to be a club rat.
Oh, God. A club rat.
I went to the club every Friday and every Saturday night for probably 3 years.
Oh, my gosh.
I was just never not
That is
dancing.
rat status.
I know, right? I was really into the club. I met a lot of people there. I kissed people there.
Yeah.
I really had a good time. I watched some people fuck against a wall once, and I was like, I don't know if I'm into this or if I hate it.
I wouldn't say I was quite rat status, but I was there.
Yeah, I went a lot this place I went to was just grimy as hell. But I mean, like, a good club is grimy, right? Like,
Yeah.
You know, you gotta have a good club that's grimy.
Yeah.
It no longer exists, which really bumps me out. But it was always ladies' night.
Nice.
The ladies always got in for free, and they had really cheap drinks. It was like $2.50.
Oh my God.
And I just really didn't drink a lot. I just was there to dance.
Yeah.
You know? And then they would do free shots, like every couple of hours on the dance floor.
What the hell? Free shots?
The servers, always very attractive women, young women, would wear these holsters.
I've seen those, yeah.
And they would have like a shot mix in them, and then they would pour them into your mouth as the choo choo song, you know, come and ride the train
and ride it.
Woo woo! And every time the woo woo happened, they would pour a shot into your mouth, and you would form the little train, and you'd be underneath it. You get the shot poured in your mouth. Yeah,
this is wild. Oh my God.
Yeah, I was a big fan. I was a big fan. For like a while, that was my friend who was in that position.
Yeah.
And she would like, she would have me stay longer, and she would like hold my chin, and it was like a whole sensual thing.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she was hardcore lesbian, so it's really very sexy.
I'm blushing.
But that's not what we were going to talk about initially.
No, but
it's
fun to reminisce.
But it did make me think about like who I was then and who I am now and what I want to be. What do you want to be in 2023?
I want to be more helpful. I was actually thinking about it the other day because I was kind of called out for a thing that I do, and I've always done. When I start to work with new people, I usually don't introduce myself. I ignore them for the better part. And I usually am like, I'll give you a week, and then maybe I'll learn your name.
I see, because you expect them to go. Like, they won't make it?
Yeah. And for me, that's like, maybe I shouldn't do that anymore. Because I was like asked, like, why do you do that? Why don't you make it more of a welcoming space? And actually, like, see if you can be helpful in some ways. Because maybe some of those people leave because you're being a dick.
Yeah, because they're like, I don't want to work somewhere where nobody bothers to know my name.
Exactly. So I was trying to think about what I could do to like remedy that. And I was like, introduce yourself and just offer. Just say, hey, yeah. I'm here. If you need anything or have any questions, just let me know. That's it. That's it. Yeah. So I want to be more helpful. I definitely want to get back into my art. I've been gathering all my stuff again and being like, okay, I want to like make a little station. I'm going to start getting back into that because it really does. It's a nice thing for me to do that takes my head out of just like playing on Instagram or watching a TV show and going to work and doing that over and over and over and over.
Yeah, I also am like trying to get more into writing again. I feel in a better headspace to do so. And so I have been. If you're not a Patreon subscriber, you should become one, specifically because I write up a weekly post about cool stuff. Sometimes it's ruminations on some trending topic or whatever, but I always at the end give like, here's what I'm reading, here's what I'm watching, here's what I'm listening to. And I'm really having a blast writing them, and I've gotten some good feedback from y'all. So if you're not a Patreon subscriber, you can subscribe for as little as $3 a month. And you should go there to read my words. And so I would like to do more of that in 2023. More writing. Mm-hmm.
You're a great writer too. I would like to see that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to be even more trans. Yeah. I mean, I am 9 months on testosterone, and I know I want to go to the year mark and then sort of reevaluate at that point.
Okay.
And see where I'm at. I've really enjoyed going to the gym a lot, and I always try to have like some kind of like goal when it comes to like physical achievement. Like maybe I want to run a race, or I want to do a bike race or something like that. And so I'm trying to come up with what that will look like in 23. I've always wanted to do like an actual bike race, like a cycling race.
Yeah.
But I've never either. I haven't gotten up to the point that I could do it. Like I did a duathlon.
Yeah, you
and
did.
That was great. But I wanted to do like a 10 or a 20 mile bike race. I thought that would be really fun. I don't really have a great bike for bike racing, but I don't really care. Like I just want to do it for fun.
Yeah, just do it for funsies.
Yeah, just to give it a shot. See if I can do it.
Taking risks.
I know.
Isn't it funny? Like, or not funny, just like so much has changed in 1 year.
Yeah. A lot.
A lot. Yeah.
Yeah. What's changed the most for you?
Well, obviously, leaving my marriage was the big one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like this whole year of like, I mean, January of last year, you were going into surgery.
Well, I was getting my revision. Yeah.
Your revision. And then like we moved in together.
Mm-hmm.
Did all that.
Yeah. It was a year ago, basically, that you moved in.
Yeah. It's been a lot. It feels nice to be settled now. And I think maybe for this year, concentrating more on like, okay, I am settled. That was the goal, was to get into my own home, which is done now. So it's like, okay, well, the next step is I'm going to have to jump into that divorce process, which is going to be difficult, but it just needs to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wish you the best in 23.
Samesies.
Yeah. Also, just as a reminder to our listeners, I'm not a lady.
Yes.
So I just want to remind everybody, not a lady. Okay.
Did I?
No, not you.
Oh, okay. I was
there was a listener who was like, I love you ladies. And I was like, no,
okay,
not a lady. But thanks for the compliment that you love us. Appreciate your support.
Yes.
But please don't misgender me. Mm-hmm. Maybe they haven't made it that far in our catalog of episodes. They don't know that I've changed a lot about myself.
I think I know who you have today.
You do know. Yes.
I do, because you mentioned.
Yes.
Don't remember the name though.
I'm talking about Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld.
Okay.
And this is actually going to be a two-parter. His story is extensive enough, and I want to give it a lot of breathing room.
Okay.
And not feel rushed or leave stuff out that I think is important to know. So you'll hear part 1 today, and then the next time I record, you'll hear part 2.
Okay.
So just as a reminder, Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld was the founder of the world's first gay rights organization, and so much more. But the reason we've heard of him before on this show is because I talked about a patient of his who had the first documented gender affirmation surgery. So that's who he is. He was a pioneer in that regard.
Okay.
So Magnus Hirschfeld was born on May 14th, 1868.
Whoa.
Long time ago.
Long time ago.
In the Prussian city of Kolberg. His parents were Jewish. They were named Hermann and Friederike Hirshfeld. Now, this next thing is not important, but also very curious for me because I was like, wait, what? Okay. His parents were relatives of one another.
Like cousins?
Yeah. Friederike, his mother, her grandmother was her husband's father's sister.
Oh, I can't even follow that.
I know. Basically, Magnus's great-grandmother and great-aunt were siblings.
Okay.
So that's a lot.
That's Sumerian into the family.
Yeah. So I had a friend. I was like, open up a group chat. And I was like, I know I got a friend who's into this shit. And I was like, hey, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for their relationship? Like, who are they to each other, his parents? And she said that this means that Friederike, his mother, and his father, Hermann, were first cousins once removed.
Okay.
Yikes. Like, definitely too close to be having children.
Family.
But in any case, they did get married. Friederike was quite young when they met. They met when she was like 16. She was still in school. They got married when she was 18. And she was a lot younger than him. So she ends up outliving him by like 20 years. So Hermann, Magnus's father, was a doctor, and he was a very prominent man in the Jewish community and in this town. In fact, he was so prominent that when he died, the residents of Kolberg created a monument to him in the town square, which was eventually destroyed by the Nazis when they took over. But it stood for like 30 or 40 years. The couple ended up having 11 children. Well, 10 or 11. It was kind of hard to tell. A lot.
Yikes.
10 or 11, and a lot of them went on to become very distinguished, Magnus included. Magnus's dad actually died when Magnus was only 17. So that's what I was saying about his mom was young enough that she was able to live like 20 years longer than him. There wasn't much money though when he died. Like usually people try to like squirrel some inheritance away so that if they have a young family, there's some money there, and there just really wasn't a lot of money saved. So other relatives stepped in and helped the family out financially. So that's how Magnus was able to continue to attend the school because he was in a private school.
Oh, wow.
Magnus went on to college, and initially he was interested in the modern languages. Like he really liked writing and languages and poetry and stuff like that. But he eventually was like, you know what? I need to have a practical degree.
Yeah, because, like, that's nice and all, but it's like, when you get around the world and it's like, I'm a linguist.
Yeah, I like writing poetry. Yeah, me too. I have an MFA in it, buddy. Guess what I'm not doing? Not making money off of poetry. Some people do, but it's very hard to do. So he decided, like, I don't want to have to struggle like that, so I am going to go to medical school. At medical school, he actually experienced a really traumatic incident that shaped who he would become. During a lecture in medical school on what was called sexual degeneracy, a gay man who had been locked up in an asylum for 30 years because he was gay was paraded naked in front of the class and verbally berated.
What the hell?
Yeah. And Magnus was apparently like the only one in the class who was upset by this. Like even his own best friend was like, what's the big deal? He's a degenerate. And Magnus was like, he's a fucking person.
Yeah, that's a human being in front of you. And
this incident forever imprinted on him. Now, Magnus he kept his own private life pretty private, but most biographers agree that he was gay. One biographer called him bisexual, but I don't have any evidence that he ever dated women seriously. Like he never had a serious partnership with a woman. Maybe he was attracted to women. I don't know. Again, he did not talk about his private life.
Yeah.
And I do know that he had 2 male partners. So my vibe is gay. And so that would make sense of why this incident would be so horrific for him.
Yeah. And also probably why he wanted to stay private. Just being like, you're seeing this. How traumatic. And like, I don't want to be that person,
Yeah, I don't want to be the person who becomes paraded in front of a medical class. Like, that's fucked up. So before he started his first practice, he went on a major trip abroad. This was his first time really traveling around the world. He visited mostly the United States, and then on the way back went through North Africa and Italy. So when he was in the US, he spent quite a bit of time in Chicago, and he was introduced to the gay subculture in Chicago, which was thriving at the time, and realized that it was very similar to the gay subculture that was happening in Berlin. And it started him to really think about, like, okay, if gay people are like this here and gay people are like this in Berlin, are gay people like this everywhere? Like, is this kind of sexuality representative in every culture? So when he went to North Africa and Italy, he also sought that out and found that that in fact was true. There was gay people and gay subculture in every place that he visited. And so he started to believe that homosexuality was universal. It happened in every place, even if it had never been touched by colonialism, which was a really progressive thought at the time, and probably correct. In fact, we know it's correct. When he returned to Germany, he did start up his first medical practice. His specialty when he started was naturopathy, like natural medicine.
Like kind of like they call it holistic.
Well, holistic is the idea that you treat the whole body through Western and Eastern medicine.
Oh, okay.
But he was really into the idea that there are natural remedies for things and that we should take them seriously. And that was like not a thing that actual medical doctors really vibed with at the time. And in fact, is kind of not really the thing now. It's kind of rare for you to find a doctor who's like, hey, you know what else you should try? Acupuncture.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it was always sort of this Western imperialist idea of what medicine is. Medicine is only science, and this other stuff is like woo-woo garbage.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, I think there's something to it. And so he started his practice with naturopathy in mind. And that was like what drew a lot of different kind of people to him, right? People who had sought out quote unquote traditional medicine.
And nothing was working for them.
And then they would seek him out. And a lot of those ended up being gay people who were trying to find a cure to being gay. So one night, Hirshfeld found a soldier on the doorstep of his practice. The man was begging Dr. Hirshfeld to like find a way to help him overcome his homosexuality. And Hirshfeld was like, hey, buddy, it's the middle of the night. Go home.
Yeah.
Go home, come back tomorrow, and we'll have a conversation. We'll talk about some things, and we'll just have a whole thing happen. We'll have a conversation. And the soldier was like, no, you don't understand. Like, that's not going to work for me. And it happened to be that was the eve of this soldier's wedding.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So for him, like, it was like now or never. I have to get this. I have to fix this because I can't stop. I can't stop thinking about men. I can't stop envisioning a life with men. And I'm supposed to marry this woman. And it's now or never.
Yeah.
The soldier left Hirshfeld's practice and he killed himself.
Oh my gosh.
He left his private papers for the doctor, like in his will or whatever. In his suicide note, he wanted his private papers to go to Dr. Hirshfeld. And in the letter, inside the private papers was a letter to Dr. Hirshfeld. And in the letter, the soldier told Dr. Hirshfeld that despite all of his efforts, he couldn't make himself straight and that he no longer could live with the guilt and the shame of being gay. So he said, like, I don't have the strength to tell my parents the truth. I can't come out to people. I don't know how one lives like this. Like, I can't live like this. And he ended the note with this to Dr. Hirshfeld. The thought that you could contribute to a future when the German fatherland will think of us in more just terms sweetens the hour of death.
Yikes.
Yeah. But it's like a call to action, right? Mm-hmm. Please help make this better for us.
Mm-hmm.
Hirshfeld was obviously very disturbed by this experience.
I would be too. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Like,
that's heartbreaking.
If a student wrote me a note that was like, hey, I still feel like dying, but I'm hoping you can help make the future brighter. I'd be like, oh my God, I have to make the future brighter.
Yeah.
I have to. I have to, and to honor this kid's death. So Hirschfeld was like, you know what? This is fucked up and also not unique. Like the idea of people dying by suicide because they didn't know how to live with being gay was like a relatively common thing that was happening. And he was aware of that. And that was partially because in Germany at the time, there was a part of the criminal code called Paragraph 175. Paragraph 175 specifically banned sexual acts between men. It said, quote, unnatural sex acts committed between persons of the male sex or by humans with animals is punishable with imprisonment, a loss of civil rights as well. Yeah, because having sex between two consenting adults is the same as having sex with a animal. Cool. And it was a crime. Yeah, so you could like identify as a gay person, but you couldn't act on being a gay person. Otherwise, you would get arrested. Hirshfeld saw that the law and the culture was leading to all of these unnecessary deaths, and the internalized shame was also leading to these unnecessary deaths. And he believed that after like just observing what he'd already seen, that was happening for something that should not be criminalized because it was innate or inbred. Like that's how we are born. So he's the first person who really came up with the idea that homosexuality is something you're born as or you just are, rather than something you do. Shortly after this incident with the soldier, Hirschfeld decided that he must try to make Germany a safer place for gay men. So under a certain pseudonym, Hirschfeld published his first pamphlet on homosexuality around this time. It was called Sappho and Socrates, or How to Explain the Love of Men and Women for Persons of Their Own Sex. Very long title.
Yes. Very instructive.
and it really contains some of his early ideas about how homosexuality is universal. It exists in every culture. It exists in every race. And that homosexuality had existed since the dawn of man. That's why he uses Socrates and Sappho. Because there was homosexual stuff in all of the ancient Greek shit. And like, you know, a lot of Western letters and science are based on whatever the Greek and Romans were doing. And if they're gay, why can't we all be gay?
Yeah.
And obviously, if they were gay, it's because that's a natural thing to be. So that same year, Hirschfeld, along with a lawyer named Edward Oberg, and a publisher named Max Spohr, and a writer named Franz Josef von Bülow, founded the Scientific Humanitarian Committee, which focused on trying to repeal paragraph 175. This was and is considered like the first really big gay rights organization. It was founded, there was one early, but this is the one that's like going to do big stuff.
Yeah.
It focused on trying to repeal paragraph 175, but they also argued that the law encouraged blackmail.
Interesting. Well, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they specifically were like, blackmail of men in prominent positions, lawyers, teachers, politicians, doctors, so on and so forth. It was like, if you found out that person was gay, you could blackmail them, right? You catch them in the act, you could blackmail them. And that the law was encouraging that behavior, which is also against the law. It's against the law to blackmail people. So as you might imagine, many folks had a problem with Hirschfeld and his committee and his ideas, including his own family.
Oh.
According to scholar Peter Tatchell, Hirschfeld's family asked him, told him, why don't you study something more respectable like cholera? And arguing that studying homosexuality will not bring him any acclaim or joy. To which Hirschfeld responded, "What are you saying, that cholera brings you more joy than sexuality?"
That is a clap back.
I love it so much. He was actually quite funny, I think. But all jokes aside, the Scientific Humanitarian Committee did make some waves. They gathered more than 6,000 signatures from prominent Germans on a petition to repeal paragraph 175. These names included people like Albert Einstein, Rainer Maria Rilke, Hermann Hesse, Thomas Mann.
Oh, wow.
Like really important people. And many, many, many more. The bill was brought before the Reichstag in 1898, but it didn't end up going anywhere. But Hirshfeld kept this cause as one of his primary goals, while also pivoting his work towards studying and educating others on gender and sexuality. So we're talking like 1898.
I know. This is so intense for the time that it's happening.
Yeah, and I think the more I read about Hirshfeld and his ideas and his theories and the things that he did, the more I'm like, why are we having the same fucking conversations? And it is 120 years later.
Yeah.
It's boggling my mind. But here we are.
Yeah.
In 1898.
Yeah.
Hirshfeld started the world's first scientific journal about sexual variance called the Yearbook of Intermediate Sexual Types, which actually stayed in publication until 1933. So that means almost 35 years. He was publishing this yearly journal, basically, of sexuality studies, and specifically focused on sexual variance, people who fell outside of whatever the mainstream was. And I find that to be really interesting because it closed down in 1933, which coincides with Hitler's rise to power.
Yeah.
So very obvious what happens here.
Got shut down.
Yeah, got shut down. So I want to spend a little bit of time pivoting to discussing his theories about sexuality and gender. So a lot of this stuff is not going to come in chronological order. So far we've been in chronological order, right? He was born, he went to school, he started his medical practice.
What he started.
Now we're going to be like, here are his ideas, and these are going to encompass most of his life and career. So they're not going to be like specifically in order. I just want to get them all out there so we can talk about them and what they mean. And then on the next episode, we're going to dive into like what happens because of these ideas. So Hirschfeld's guiding principle of his entire life, and was actually the same guiding principle for the motto for the Scientific Humanitarian Committee, was through science to justice.
That's pretty brilliant.
He was intent on building academic scholarship and theories in sexuality studies that would hopefully improve the lives of LGBTQ plus people by reducing discrimination and prejudice based on scientific theories. Like, if we understand that homosexuality is natural, then we wouldn't be afraid of it.
Well, that's one of the biggest problems, is like the fear of the great unknown, is people who are so ignorant, who don't know and don't take the time to learn or figure it out. And so it's just that strange, scary thing over there.
And if we have science that says it's real, then maybe we'll believe that it's real. And it's less weird or strange if it's just a natural occurring phenomenon, which is what his goal was.
Yeah. And science is universal. So it is a way to connect with everybody.
It can be. I mean, I think it's hard because science, like everything else, is through the lens of the scientist, right? So if their lens is very like white male centered, then that science is going to be very white male centered. That's why we don't have a lot of ideas or understanding about things like what happens during, for instance, maternal death. When women are struggling with why does the United States have a high maternal death rate compared to other quote unquote advanced nations? Why is ours higher? Well, partially because like our science doesn't fucking care about women. And it doesn't study women, and it doesn't study people of color. Like whenever you have, for instance, the signs of a heart attack.
Oh yeah.
They're geared towards men, and white men at that. So like blue lips, for example. Well, on somebody who's very dark skinned, you don't see blue lips. What are you going to look for then? Are you going to look at their gums? What do those look like? What do their fingertips look like? Why aren't we talking about it in the scientific journals? Like, that's what I mean by science is universal, but it's also through the lens of whoever's creating it. And that is going to be important when it comes to Hirschfeld.
Okay.
Because there is some stuff that is problematic. It's just inevitable. So he believed that if he could find scientific evidence and promote scientific theories that proved homosexuality and gender variation were just natural occurring phenomenon, then people would be less likely to put laws forward that would discriminate against them. And he believed that same-sex attraction was angeboren.
What does that mean?
Inborn.
Oh, okay.
Or innate. It was just innately in you. You were born with it. And that sexuality also did not mark someone's character. So a gay person could be a good person just as easily as a straight person could be a bad person. being whatever your sexuality was not an inherent
just
marker of your quality of
straight
character.
doesn't mean you're a fucking amazing person.
Correct.
You are not special.
And I think like that was a really big idea at the time that had not really been put forward because, again, it was believed that any sexual variation outside of heterosexuality was deviant.
Mm-hmm.
So you were a deviant if you wanted this thing. I think it's important to pause for a second and say that, like, you know, this theory about inborn homosexuality was really important at the time, and it was really important for a long time, and it still is important to some people that this idea exists.
Mm-hmm.
But I really am hesitant to, one, believe that, and two, to believe it necessary, because people should be entitled to humanity regardless of whether or not the thing that is different about them is inborn or not.
Mm-hmm.
My choice, if somebody believes that you choose to be gay, my choice is just as valid as someone else's choice not to be.
Mm-hmm.
And my life should not be questioned or treated unfairly because I made a choice.
Or pigeonholed. Yeah.
And the idea that, like, you know, we always heard, like, I remember growing up, and one of the biggest arguments for gay rights was like, well, it's not a choice. It's not a choice. It's just who you are. It's just who you are. And again, I get why people really had to tie a lot of their policies and politics to it. You know, it made it easier to tell straight people, like, you got to vote for it because it's just who we are.
Mm-hmm.
But I also hate it. Because if I do make a choice that is different from your choice, doesn't mean that I'm less than.
Yeah.
I still am entitled to my rights. So that's just an important little side note.
Mm-hmm.
One of his most groundbreaking theories was that of the, quote, doctrine of sexual intermediaries.
Intermediaries.
Yeah, so if you think about something that's intermediate, it's like in between.
Okay.
At the time, most people believed, and many people still do, that there is a very strict gender binary when it comes to humans. There's male and there's female. There's Adam and there's Eve. And those are intractable states, meaning that males cannot be females and females cannot be males.
Mm-hmm.
They're intractable. Hirshfeld proposed at the time that there are actually a wide variety of genders and, quote, between which there are no empty points present, but rather unbroken connecting lines.
Oh. Is he like one of the first people to ever say this?
Yes.
Okay. That's,
as far as we know, in recorded history, the first. Like,
the first
right,
person.
like in a scientific journal, he is saying there is no such thing as a strict binary. He also believed there was no such thing as a true woman or a true man.
Wow.
He said everybody is a combination of these things, and they change over time,
Mm-hmm.
and they vary between people.
That is wild.
Again, early 1900s.
I know.
A long fucking time ago. 120 years ago, this is what he's saying. According to a scholar who studies Hirshfeld, J. Edgar Bauer, Hirshfeld promoted the theory that sexuality and to some extent gender is on a continuum. This allows for an infinite variation of sexual constitutions depending on the way the masculine and feminine combine. This means that each person's sexuality is unique to them and them only. There are no two people who have the exact same sexuality. And even more important, sexuality and gender identity can change throughout the course of your lifetime.
Look at that.
I found this very, like, validating to read a lot of this. Because it's like, you know, I remember one of the things that Anthony asked me was, like, oh, are you going to take down all your pictures of your wedding? And I was like,
that, yeah.
no, why would I do that? And he was like, well, because you presented as a woman then. And I was like, yeah, but that was who I was then. Like, who I was
it
then
doesn't erase.
is not invalidated by who I am now, and who I am now is not invalidated by who I was then.
Mm-hmm.
Like, those two people existed, and they're different people because you can change over time, and I have. And I'm embracing that change, and I love where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, is everyone trans? Should we all be trans? I think we're all trans. And here's Hirshfeld being like, yeah, we're all a little trans.
We're all a little bit there.
We're all a little trans. In fact, in 1910, he coined the term transvestite or in English, we would call a transvestite.
Mm-hmm.
We no longer use that term.
We do not.
It's a lot of people find it offensive. Most people find it offensive, but at the time, it was a very neutral term.
Okay.
It was like he made it up. He said like this is this new word I'm going to create that describes this specific set of people.
Yeah.
I'm going to use the term transgender most of the time, but when I'm talking about his theories, I'm going to use that word because that's the word he created to describe what he's talking about.
Okay.
So when he's talking about this category of transvestites, they were any people who presented their gender, so their outside presentation, different from their sex assigned at birth.
Okay.
Which really encompassed a lot of people. So for him, a transvestite was Abby, a gender nonconforming cis woman, to me, a person who's trans, to a drag performer, to somebody who fully identifies as the opposite from their assigned sex at birth, right? So a fully transitioned FTM or MTF.
Okay.
So as you can see, that's a huge category of people.
It's very much an umbrella term.
Yes. And that's what he was intending it to be.
Yeah.
It encompasses a lot of different kind of people. He was also the first person to propose the idea that one's gender is distinct from one's sexuality.
Which is huge.
People still don't get it.
They don't.
They think if you're trans, that means you're gay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're a trans woman and you date men, then you're straight.
There you go.
Because you're a woman who dates men. You know what I mean? Like, it's really hard for people to wrap their brain around.
It is.
Hirshfeld provided counseling and eventually set up what we would now call group therapy for transgender people specifically.
Wow.
He also worked with the Berlin police, and he created a special pass called a Transvestitenschein.
That's a big word.
Yeah. I practiced it and I still fucked it up. They were actually transvestite certificates. So these were things that he set up with the police for gender nonconforming people to protect them from police harassment. So if a police officer saw somebody who was dressing in a way that they felt violated paragraph 175 or whatever,
yeah,
they would be able to pull out this certificate and it would be like, oh, I have a certificate from Dr. Hirschfeld's institute. And then the police would be like, okay, go on your way.
Mm-hmm.
And they would not harass them.
Wow.
Fucking what?
That's amazing.
But you can already probably tell that that's not going to be great in the future.
No.
Just like, I don't know if you saw this the other day, but Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, just asked the Department of like Motor Vehicles and Licensing to pass on a list of every person who's had their gender marker changed on their driver's license in the state of Texas.
Why?
Good fucking question.
That's scary.
It's scary, right?
It's scary.
So we can like look at what Hirshfeld was doing by creating these certificates that would allow people to freely walk around and dress as they want to dress.
Yeah.
As like some really cool thing.
But then it does create a list.
It creates a list. Yeah. It creates a document that traces a person.
Yeah.
So in 1919, Magnus Hirschfeld established the Institute for Sexual Science, the first institute of its kind in the world, almost 30 years before Kinsey opened his institute in the United States.
Wow.
Imagine, literally 103 years ago, this person created this institute. So this is this is a long quote, but it's a worthwhile quote. This is a quote from Hirschfeld's biographer and all-around expert Ralph Doza about the institute. In addition to medicine, there was also biology, psychology and psychiatry, ethnology, and anthropology. Research, teaching, and medical care were the three pillars of the institute's activity. Teaching encompassed programs on an academic level for students, continuing education for doctors, lawyers, teachers, visiting nurses, and police officers, as well as a broad spectrum of educational programs for the general public, including lectures, courses, evening counseling sessions, film programs, and the publication of journals.
Wow.
It was massive. For the first few years, they mostly treated patients for sexually transmitted diseases, particularly gonorrhea and syphilis, because it's right after World War I. It was really a problem. the gonorrhea and syphilis. Eventually, though, they began treating people for hormonal issues. A lot of men for erectile dysfunction. A lot of women who were like, I don't want to have children anymore. Like, how do I do that? So they were really having a lot of success in that area. And
it's all just sexual health.
Yep. And mostly straight people, which is always ironic, right?
Yeah.
One of their most popular programs was something called Question Evenings. So he provided a box where people could write down a question, and they would drop it anonymously into this box, and they would like have like I don't know if it was once a week or once a month, but they would have these question evenings, and they would pull the questions out and they would answer them. And so everybody would come. They would be like, "Oh, it's question evening." All of these people would show up, and they would listen to the questions and the answers from all of these panel of medical experts, right? And it was so popular that they would like have a standing room only. They couldn't all fit in the lecture hall because people were so like desperate to know answers to their questions about like, hey, when I do this, does that mean I'll get her pregnant? Like they just didn't know.
Yeah.
Like think about like teenagers, those fucking Mormons who are getting crabs in their armpits.
Yeah.
I mean, poor little babies. They just don't know. Just don't know anything. So that was what they would do. The lecture hall would be just completely packed, full of people. And a lot of the topics ended up being about heterosexual partnerships and marriages. Mm-hmm. Because they'd be like, my wife thinks I should do this, and I don't know why, and I don't want to do it, and what do you think? So earlier I mentioned that one of his key arguments against paragraph 175 was the fact that it promoted blackmail. Mm-hmm. He felt this was such a persuasive argument that he co-wrote and acted in a film in 1919 called, quote, Different from the Others. The film is one of the first, if not the first film to ever feature gay characters. And it was explicitly meant to persuade audiences that paragraph 175 needed to be repealed. So in the film, there is a very successful violinist, like an older gentleman violinist, famous violinist named Paul, and he falls in love with a student named Kurt. So this kid Kurt sees this violinist, wants to become his student, becomes his student, is learning from him, and they fall in love together. Mm-hmm. The men are, of course, not out to their families as gay or to the public, and they feel a lot of shame, and they don't know what to do, right? They're like, we love each other and we want to be together, but we also think we can't, right? Yeah. The world does not let us.
Yeah.
So they start to visit Dr. Hirschfeld, who plays himself, and he tells, Dr. Hirschfeld brings in Paul's parents and is like, this is totally normal and natural. Like, I want to tell you that your son's not an aberration.
Yeah.
So these were the actual things that are on the
said in the film,
because it's a silent film, so it's on the cards.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
This is what he actually says in the film. This is then obviously said to the audience too, right? Because they're reading it. You must not condemn your son because he is homosexual. He is not to blame for his orientation. It is not wrong, nor should it be a crime. Indeed, it is not even an illness, merely a variation, and one that is common to all of nature.
Pretty cut and dry.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth.
1919.
Jeez.
So eventually in the film, these two men begin to see each other out in the open. And at one point, they are seen holding hands by a man who recognizes this famous violinist. And he attempts to extort him. Paul, the violinist, pays the man off, but the man continues to come back and demand more and more money. And he has kept this from his boyfriend because he doesn't want him to freak out and know what's going on. But eventually the lover finds out about the extortion. He's like, I can't do this. This is terrifying. He leaves Paul. Paul is now alone and he's like
devastated.
Yeah, like my life is never going to be worthwhile. No one's ever going to understand me. So towards the end of the film, Paul takes a handful of pills and dies by suicide. His boyfriend then also tries to die by suicide, but Hirshfeld manages to stop him and tells him that he must stay alive in order to restore honor to his dead lover. And the film ends with a shot of paragraph 175 in a law book being crossed out.
Oh, fierce.
Yeah. The film, of course, was very controversial.
Yeah. So, like, how much backlash did he get from, like, doing stuff like this? Like, I would imagine there'd be people, like, sending death threats and...
Yes. He was brutally beaten in 1919 or 1920 in Munich. And a newspaper was like, they should have crushed his skull.
Oh my God.
Another time he was beaten up again, like horribly beaten. And when we get into the Nazi era, we're going to get into some of that serious stuff.
Okay.
But like there was definitely pushback, right? Like he was not universally
I'm
loved.
imagining he would, be pissing some people off by this time.
In fact, when this film came out, it caused such a controversy that Germany's like conservative movement caused, like, they created a new censorship program that was instituted in the country of Germany, and the film was eventually banned. And we no longer actually have access to the original full-length film. There's a shortened version, which I was able to watch online through the Munich Film Museum. But that's all that's ever existed, like survived. They did a great job, but there's censorship. But what was funny is like these representatives from the Soviet Union came to the Institute and they watched the film and they were like, this was so controversial.
Wow.
And I'm like, the Russians thought it was tame. Okay. So that's how things have changed.
Yeah.
So he definitely had a lot of pushback, but he's like bound and fucking determined to have this change. And the Institute was so vast and incredible. So it had these films and had these programs and had group therapy and had medical stuff. It also had a large, very large, extensive archive of all kinds of research. So some of it's like medical papers and whatnot, but also he had over the years gathered a whole lot of sexual artifacts from sometimes like ancient dildos and stuff.
Oh.
He had a lot of it. He had a lot of like really cool old to kind of prove to everybody like this shit's been around forever. Like we're not talking about something new here. We're looking at dildos that were made in the 3rd century, right? These have always existed. There were lots of photographs, and also he helped create an entire library of molds of intersex genitalia, which might sound weird and gross, but it was really important because he was really advocating at the time that intersex people should not be forced into some kind of sex surgery, like sex assignment surgery as infants, and that everyone should wait until they're 18 and they can make their own choice.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways that he was educating doctors and nurses on this topic was through these molds of intersex genitalia. And because a lot of people didn't know what it was and they didn't understand it and they didn't know what it looked like.
And this is all just information.
And doctors from all around the world would come to his institute to view this kind of stuff, to learn more about it. It was really, really important work that he was doing to humanize groups of people who had been dehumanized. And he also had like photographs of various people. Transgender people worked at the Institute itself. Because a lot of people would end up not able to find work after they transitioned because people were not accepting.
Yeah, and they're discriminating.
So he would employ them. It's really like fucking great. And a lot of people were seen for free at his clinic.
That's really cool.
The Institute was financed through the Magnus Hirschfeld Foundation.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, where's the money coming from, though?
Yeah, and it's all supported by private donations. The Institute was also a pioneer in treating transgender and intersex people. They offered early access to rudimentary hormone treatments. Like he was working on how to take testosterone out of like the testicles of animals and make them into a compound that humans could take, so that people like me could take testosterone.
Yeah.
And same thing, vice versa with estrogen. So he was working on hormone treatments, hair removal, some of the earliest forms of like what we would consider like laser hair removal, but they were using x-rays because they didn't know what else to do.
Oh God.
So some people got burned, but like like the people in the people were like, I don't even care that I'm getting burned. I just care that it is working.
It's getting out. Yeah.
And their in-house gynecologist, Ludwig Levy-Lenz, also began performing rudimentary bottom surgeries for both men and women, and the earliest form of what's called facial feminization surgery and facial masculinization surgery.
I've heard of that, yeah.
So he was creating like the in-house gynecologist was like groundbreaking surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually said that even when the surgeries didn't turn out the way that he had hoped or the way that the patient had hoped, that the people were the most grateful patients he'd ever had. And I am including this piece because one of the arguments that's being made right now in media about trans people and trans healthcare is that there are somehow like people might have regrets. People might have their, like, for instance, top surgery done like I did, and then later on be like, oh no, I wish I hadn't done that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are there people who detransition and who have regrets? Sure. They exist, as do of like all kinds of surgeries, right?
Yeah.
And one of the most common statistics that's used is that like hip surgery has a much greater like regret rate than any trans surgeries. And nobody's out here saying we shouldn't have hip surgeries.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're also policing things like top surgeries for young people, but not when they have breast implants.
Yeah. Yeah. You can have them as big as you want.
Yeah. So a 17-year-old teenage girl can get a breast implant, but if that same child identifies as non-binary and wants to remove their breasts, now we have a problem.
Something's wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very weird how we are applying contradictory ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, it's about bigotry. It's about discrimination. It's we feel uncomfortable with this thing, so we're using made up junk science to justify it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to recognize that even back in fucking 1919, when they were doing some real wild shit in the surgical realm, people were still more grateful for that than the way they had lived before.
Yeah.
Hirshfeld also became involved in the feminist movement at the time when he joined the League for the Protection of Mothers. He helped campaign for the decriminalization of abortion and against policies that banned women. There was like this weird thing where you couldn't work in a position of like prominence, like a teacher or whatever, if you also wanted to have children. You couldn't have both.
You had to choose.
You had to choose. It was literally illegal to become like a teacher and also have children. So there was there was also a movement in the early 1900s to extend paragraph 175 to include lesbian sex. So that would mean that sex between women would become as criminal as sex between men.
Yeah.
And he and other feminist leaders at the time successfully prevented that from happening. So that's really good. However, not everything he believed or thought or talked about or wrote about was great. Despite his support for the feminist movement at the time, he believed generally that women were just not as intelligent as men, as his just a fundamental belief. He also was a proponent of some kinds of eugenics. I feel like you can't be growing up in the 1920s in Germany and not be a eugenicist of some kind. He actually was like a really staunch anti-alcohol person. And he believed that alcoholism was a scourge on society and that there was a genetic component to being an alcoholic. So he felt it was like, it was in your genes. You can't help it, which is helpful in one way, right? Because then people can get like, they're destigmatized. But at the same time, he thought, then you should be sterilized.
No.
Like if you have alcoholism, no children for you. And he felt similarly about people with mental disabilities, which we've seen before.
I've seen that before, yeah.
In fact, one of the people who came to visit his clinic is none other than Margaret Sanger.
Oh.
Yeah, founder of Planned Parenthood, which we've talked about on the show before. He also had some pretty terrible ideas about race and racism. He repeatedly said that like racism was bad and that it was not true because when you take away people's skin, we're all the same underneath.
Okay.
So he's coming from a real scientific thing here. He's like, just like with homosexuality, underneath we're all the same kind of situation. But people of color were just not as good as white people.
Oh my God. It's like, here, come here. Like, here's this little piece of bread. And you're like, okay, I think I'm going to come over and maybe, oh no, you're going to put a noose around my neck.
Yeah, he still had some racist ideas. In fact, there's a brilliant book by a University of Washington professor named Laurie Marhofer. They wrote a book called Racism and the Making of Gay Rights, and specifically wrote about Hirshfeld's anti-black racism. Like, that's where he really fell apart.
Yeah.
He was actually pretty good about a lot of stuff. Like, next time I'm really going to talk about like his awakening in terms of like anti-imperialist and anti-colonialist ideas, which are really great. But he just could not extend that to black people. He believed that black Americans had stunted brains. He could not hear, like, he would have a whole ass conversation with fucking Langston Hughes and then be like, yeah, still think you're dumb. Like, I don't know.
What the hell?
Just seems like he could not wrap his brain around the idea that black people were as good as white people. He just couldn't. He could believe it about a lot of other races, though. He just could not about black people specifically. So he had really anti-black ideas and racist theories. So not lovely.
No.
We don't like it. Which, you know, sort of like goes to the idea that he's a very complicated person. He's a complicated character in history, in gay history, in queer history, but also so incredibly important for the work and the theories that he did. And he's also someone who was obviously influenced by the prevailing thoughts of the time. And as much as he went against the grain, he also went with the grain in areas that are disturbing to us now. So next time, I'm going to get into what happened to Hirshfeld and the Institute when the Weimar Republic fell and the Nazis took over. As well as his love life, which is very interesting.
Okay.
So I have a lot of sources. Bear with me. A lot. Let
me see it. Dear God.
I know. I read a book by Ralph Doza called Magnus Hirschfeld and the Origins of the Gay Liberation Movement. I obviously used some Wikipedia. There was a great article on the GLBTQ archive by J. Edgar Bauer. Scientific American had one by Brandy Shalas called The Forgotten History of the World's First Trans Clinic. Peter Tatchell for the Huffington Post wrote Magnus Hirschfeld advanced LGBTQ plus rights in the 1800s. His pioneering work mustn't be forgotten. The Einsteins of Sex at 150 by Benjamin Weinthal for Gay City News. Next time, I'm heavily going to suggest everybody listen to the Making Gay History podcast, season 4, episode 2. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum had a great article on Magnus Hirschfeld as well as paragraph 175. I also read some of Magnus Hirschfeld's actual writing on sex in human relationships. And then next time, I'm really going to lean heavily on these two as well. The Asian-Canadian gay activist whose theories on sexuality were decades ahead of their time by Laurie Marhofer for the conversation. And one of the world's first gay rights activists was racist and sexist. The author of a new book explores how much it should bug us by Isaac Werman for Extra Magazine. Whew.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Complicated story.
Real complicated.
Yeah.
And Nazis are going to make it so much worse.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Because he was Jewish, too. And he becomes sort of the figurehead for them of everything that they believe is wrong with Jews.
Got it.
Yeah.
It's going to get ugly, isn't it?
It gets real ugly, yeah.
Okay.
Be prepared. Be prepared for the anti-Semitism. We're going to talk about some of the racism, but we're also going to talk about some cool stuff that he did and things he learned when he traveled the world, and it's going to be good.
Alrighty.
Thank you for listening.
Okay. Prepare yourselves for part 2.
Thank you everybody for sticking with us. Don't forget to subscribe to our Patreon. And thank you to Lucas, who currently has COVID.
Boo.
So we're recording in our house again, and it's just been kind of a little nightmare today.
He's gonna hole up for a little bit. So
yeah.
Also, thank you to Jennifer Finch from L7 for our theme music.
And we'll hear from you next time.
Till next time, folks.
Bye.